I think you'd... Never mind. I'm talking to myself at this point. International Color Awards. His passion for photography began at age 6 with his first Kodak disc camera, and has since taken him to magazine assignments, to television and editorial work. Known for his adventurous spirit and commitment to capturing the perfect shot, Ian has photographed everyone from celebrities, as we'll see a lot of, to athletes, to subjects in the world's most challenging environments. Based in Los Angeles, Ian brings a combination of creativity, experience, and an unwavering dedication to every assignment. And with luck, I have it timed very nicely. That is almost 5 p.m. So if you would please join me in welcoming Ian with a gigantic round of applause.
As you can see how much I hate being in front of the camera as I turn red the minute you do that. I belong on the other side of the camera. So today, and thank you for joining us, by the way, today we are going to talk about portfolios. And truthfully, everything about portfolios for me has been my experience. I was a photo editor at magazines for about 13 years. So my first exposure to portfolios was being the reviewer, where I was reviewing other photographers' work. I wasn't considering myself a photographer at that time, even though I ended up 3 weeks after my first day at work being a still life photographer for magazines for 6.5 years, and then moving on to people and portraits and travel and celebrities and all that stuff. But at the beginning, the intent was really just to be the person that produced and assigned the photography for these magazines. I actually utilized those portfolios to teach myself a lot about the photography that I do now. I used to love looking, this is before the internet was like it is now, and I used to love looking at the portraits that I admire, studying the catch lights in the subject's eyes, and trying to figure out how the lighting was done. And that's mostly how I taught myself artificial lighting. The aspect of a portfolio that is most important is that is your first introduction to a lot of people, right? Now, back then, and for the beginning of my career, it was very easy to get meetings. Now it is not. It is very difficult. There's a lot of pay-to-play models, which essentially means that you're going to portfolio reviews where you're showcasing your work to individuals in sort of a speed dating type scenario. And you get anywhere from 15 minutes to 20 minutes to present yourself and make somebody know everything about you in a very short period of time and get them to want to choose you for their assignments. This is probably the most difficult model that there is. So that is why a portfolio is so important, because you need to be memorable in a very short period of time, no matter if that meeting is the 15 or 20 minute version, or you have that hour, hour and a half with somebody and you're lucky enough to be having a conversation for a long time. The images that you choose and the book that you present out to the person sitting across the table from you is the difference between getting work and not getting work.
So would you say it's like an elevator pitch on steroids?
So the ask was if it's like an elevator pitch on steroids, and I would say, yeah. And you have to have your elevator pitch ready. And it's something that I've really evolved over time on how I sell myself. I used to say one whole thing, and then after working, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a bit, but after working with some consultants, I realized that my elevator pitch really wasn't saying the whole story about me. And of course, people are going to interpret you not just based on your work, but what you look like and all the other factors that are there. And this one particular consultant took one look at me, but didn't understand how this produced the kinds of portraits that I do. So she was curious. So it actually worked to my benefit that my appearance is, you know, an ex-jock, which is pretty much what I am. But she was like, you make vulnerable portraits of actors and celebrities and, you know, athletes, and how do you do that being this person? And so that started to evolve into what became my current elevator pitch. But that's good to ask. So the main thing that I can only stress 1,000 times over, and you'll probably hear me say it again tonight, is presentation. You have to realize that it's not just what you show when you walk in the room, but how you show it. And then everything in your book needs to represent you as a photographer. It's not just about the work. Yes, the work has to be good. Yes, the work has to be of the level that you would warrant an assignment. And yes, the talent part of this is a big part of the equation, but let's just assume that's the given, that you have some kind of talent, that you're a professional photographer. If you've been paid, you're a professional photographer. The presentation of the book should speak to who you are as a photographer as well. So if you're a rock star photographer and you're loud and boisterous and you bring a ton of energy into the room, your book should reflect that as well. I'm kind of quiet, so my book is kind of quiet. Now, I worked with the designer to brand myself, and you are a brand, so don't ever forget that. I don't know fonts, but he does. So I went to him and I said, what would be a good font for me? He knew my photography, he knew my work in general, and so we decided upon this. He actually suggested that my name become the big thing, because even though it's a name, it is really just 3 letters. And he's like, we can play off of that. And so that started the idea that this was a brand. For a little while, I was using a self-published magazine as a leave behind, where I would create a magazine of my work from start to finish. The ads were ads that I shot for somebody else. The editorial was assignments that I did, or I'd write a story about something, or I'd show some of my personal work. And we called it Ian Magazine for that same reason. And it's all about branding. So don't ever forget that you are a brand. You want that recognizability, just like a Coca-Cola can or a Pepsi can. You know that logo without even thinking about it, right? There's a big concept that young photographers in particular think, which is that I need to show a ton of work in order for a reviewer to understand what I do. But the reality is less can often be more. Now, we all struggle this part because we love certain shoots that we did, or we love certain days that we were shooting this, and here's a result of that, and this is how I got here. Or maybe it's a great story of overcoming a gigantic obstacle that you always want to make sure to tell the reviewer, but you can't be married to your images. Being a former photo editor, I would argue that I have a pretty good self-critique ability. I'm really hard on myself as a photographer. I recognize that in a portfolio, you can't have 15 images on white mixed with all these other things, because you've already set it when it's on white, as an example. Or this style of lighting that I do multiple times, I don't need to show it every version of it. Maybe there's the strongest of those 15 times I did it, or 12 times I did it, that I can put in the portfolio, and that will represent that aspect of my photography. So sometimes it's just about thinking about which are the images that really represent you as you as a photographer, you as a brand, you in everything that you're capable of doing. And if you do have that 15 minutes, that it's a point that you're trying to make. So you need to think about those aspects of it. And quite often that happens with less images. Getting beyond the images really is about separating yourself from being the person who completed that image, created that image, and understanding that part of what you're selling is what you do as a photographer, what you can essentially show up to the job and give to your client. And it's not just about pushing the button. I say this in every speaking engagements I'm ever in. How much time do we actually shoot? It's like 10% of your time. The rest of it is chasing invoices, coming up with new ideas, testing, doing photo shoots where you might be on set for a day, but you've spent 4 or 5 days producing that photo shoot. That's really where your time is taken up. So getting beyond the idea that what you're showcasing is just the imagery is something that you need to put your mind in that space, so that you can say, when you sit down for that coffee with that person, or you sit down for that quick meeting, you're able to say, well, this is how I work. This is the kind of crew that I put together. This is the style of what it's like to be on a set with me. And you're representing that in that moment. And then you follow through with it on set. Yes.
Part of your presentation on that meeting, do you also say where your pictures at? Sorry for my English.
No, it's fine.
Like to the publications of your job. So if you say, for example, oh, some of my pictures.
I understand.
Here. Do you say that to the
Yeah.
designer or no?
So the question, I'm going to repeat the question just so the audience can understand as well. So the question was basically, do you explain in your portfolio what publication that image ended up in, or what this photograph was for? I'm a little bit of both minds on that. On my website, yes, absolutely. But then I sort of took it away because I realized that I had maybe 20 pictures where it said the person, who they are, what they do, and the publication. But then I had these other ones, which maybe it was a great image of a model, and it was just for me or just for them. And I don't really want to say that. So I kind of changed a little bit there to putting the name of the person and what they do. And that was it on the website only. But if there's a tear sheet, I have a section on the website that shows all the work I do in editorial, all the work I do for advertising, and that's where those things are put out there. And they also have captions. Now, on the particular website that I have, you have to click on the image to see the caption. So if you go to the website, you'll see a grid of all my images, but it's not until you click on an individual image and it comes up that the caption's there. I designed it that way. In my portfolio, I don't have that, but literally yesterday I met with a creative director and he suggested, what do you think about putting the names of these people? And we had this very interesting argument back and forth, or conversation back and forth, whether that would take away from the images or not. So I would say if it takes away from the images, don't. You can always put an index in the back. For me, I like telling the stories. So as I'm sitting, I know my routine when I'm at a meeting, and I know generally the look on a reviewer's face when they're intrigued in something, and then I can drop the story. So I'm not watching the book, I'm watching them. And when I see a reaction in their eyes or something changes in their face, I'll say, oh, funny story about that image, or something along those lines. And I've got that routine down, kind of like the elevator pitch, where I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, any image in this book, and it's easy to do. And so I built this over time, and you continue to build it as you change your book and add to it. It's always a personal decision. Everything I tell you is not the right way. It's my way of doing it. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means these are the things I've experienced, and these are some of the suggestions I could throw out to you guys. A big, big component of all portfolios is something I like to call eye breaks. And what that is, particularly with portraits, because psychologically, our nature is to look into the eyes of something, right? So as we look out on the audience, I look at your eyes in relation to you, right? I'm not looking at a portfolio. I have portraits in my portfolio. The viewer is going to look at the eyes first. That's often where things start, right? It's just us, human nature. Whether it's travel, still life, portraits, weddings, whatever you're showing in your portfolio, you need to have something I call eye breaks in order to give your viewers a rest from that. It's overwhelming. If you've got 40 pages of portraits, that's a lot of information being fed to somebody, often in a very short period of time. So giving them a visual break, it could be, if it's a portrait book, for example, it's a portrait of somebody not looking at the camera. Or maybe a pulled back shot where the person is very small in the frame and you've got a wide expanse of sky or a big building or something that breaks the monotony of constantly looking at people in the eyes. If it's a wedding portfolio, maybe it's a pulled back shot of the wedding scene. If it's a still life portfolio, maybe it's a simple image where it's just one color across a spread. These are things that help your viewer relax as they're looking at your work. And again, this is about playing that little psychological game of getting them to like your aesthetic, because you're not just going to get hired on the work, you're going to get hired on who you are as a person, and you're going to get hired on the outcome of hiring you as a brand, you as an individual, you as a crew, whatever that case might be. Next is the flow of your portfolio. Now, this is probably the thing I watched photographers struggle with the most when I was an editor, where you'd be looking at a book and you'd flip page, flip page, flip page, and then all of a sudden you'd be like, that doesn't make sense. Then you flip page, okay, now this really doesn't make sense, and you get stuck on that. And you don't want your reviewer to get stuck on why did that get put there. Now that said, everyone's an art director, everyone's a creative director, everyone's got a comment as to where you place the images in your book, and you as a photographer are trying to satisfy the world, and it's impossible to do that. So you have to just do your best, take your best guesstimate as to what's going to satisfy the masses, and not worry about the individual who says, I think you should move this image to here. You're going to hear that at almost every, conversation you have from somebody. They just don't understand why you did this here or did that there. That's the stuff, you're succeeding when you don't hear those comments, I guess is a good way to look at it. So this is just going to run you through pretty quickly my book. And basically, it's a decision that I made, a decision that I made on, let me get that back, sorry. Ooh, lost it there. Should play it on its own. There it goes. So for me, I wanted a flow of energy and a flow of my story that if you are looking at it this quickly in those 15 minutes, trust me, this happens where people who see books all the time might just flip through it very quickly, that I want a certain flow. I want them to extrapolate something psychologically about who I am as a person and as a photographer, what I'm going to show up like, what kind of work I can produce, the level of work I can produce, what's my color palette, what's my black and white look like. All these things I'm trying to answer very, very quickly. So I put this in a way where this is actually an exercise I do when I put a book together, is I look at it that quickly. And I look for those things that make me pause. And if I pause, then I think about what's making me pause. Am I pausing because it's a striking image? Or am I pausing because it doesn't make sense in the flow of the portfolio? Any questions on that? Because I feel like that can be the most confusing thing. Yes?
What do you mean extrapolate psychologically?
Okay, so
Do you have those
yeah.
particular traits you're searching for?
Okay, that's a good question. So the question was, what do I mean by psychologically eliciting something from my viewer, right? Okay. I have a big belief, I was a double in art and psychology, so part of it, but I have a big belief that there is a ton of psychology in photography, and I utilize that in my actual work, which is making images, where how I deal with my subjects, a lot of it comes from a place of a psychological game I'm playing with them. Who's in charge? Am I going to get something from you that you do or don't want to give to me? And how am I going to do that in a way that doesn't offend you, doesn't turn you off, doesn't make you stiffen up, doesn't do anything that will not let me get the job done? And my job is to get the job done. I also have to read my subject very, very quickly. Obviously, with celebrities, time is often very little. I can get as little as 2 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes sometimes, and that's it. So I have to make a very quick assessment of somebody I've never met, I've seen as characters on a TV show or a movie or whatever, and I have to quickly assess who they are as a person so that I can capture their realness or who they are very quickly and try to elicit something that's maybe different, right? We see these images all the time, so I need something slightly different. When it comes to portfolio, it's the same thing. Your reviewer is somebody that you're psychologically trying to connect to in a certain way because you want them to hire you ultimately to do some work. So I'm reading them, and like I said, when they're looking at that portfolio, I'm looking at them. I'm studying what they're responding to, what their reactions are, so I can then use those sort of checks to figure out what I'm going to talk about to that person. If they're responding to a certain style that I do, I'm going to talk about that. And so these are the little things that come into this that maybe you don't think. You think it's just put the book down in front of somebody and you're done, and then let the work speak for itself. The work's never going to speak for itself all the way. It's going to only get you to a certain place. All right, some of the keys to a successful portfolio. Number one, strong start. You have to have an image that grabs your viewer's attention right out the gate. So all the things I decided on in here with intention, okay? Then maintaining the interest through the middle of your portfolio. That means that you have to save some of your strongest work for the middle. And I know you think, let's lead with the strongest stuff. Yes, the first image, sure. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, that might be all that's seen. So those first 6 images, I used to have this theory that anyone looking at your website is only going to look at 6 images and then they're moving on, right? And if you look at the analytics on social media, it proves that point, that people don't have a big attention span, less now than ever. They don't even watch a reel all the way through anymore, right? 30 seconds is too much for them, or 90 seconds, or whatever it is. Everybody wants everything in 15 seconds, right? So those first few images are super, super important. But as you'll see, if you have people that continue through the book, you need to maintain that to some degree. You want them to get to the end, if possible. Sometimes it's a good thing. When I have a meeting with somebody, they'd look at 4 images and they'll say, obviously you know what you're doing. Let's talk about you. And now they want to know who I am and what kind of work do I produce and how do I produce it and how do I hire my crew and what's my set like? What's a typical photo shoot like with me? Those are the best days. I don't even care. They've already looked at my work. They've already seen my website. They've seen my Instagram, whatever the case is. They've already made their decision about me. Now they just want to know if they want to spend a day or a week or a month on set with me. Keep that in mind always. As I mentioned, the eye breaks, super important. So as you're going through that portfolio, you're getting those eye breaks for your reviewer, and that also gives you opportunity to start talking about stuff, right? You need, especially in those 15-minute ones, you need to be talking. You need to be selling yourself. You're the brand that you need to sell, and not in a used car salesman kind of way. It's not my style. You know, I'm a quiet guy. When I shoot, I actually tell my subjects, if I'm quiet, it means you're doing great and I don't need to say anything. That's like a line I use. There's some psychology behind that line because I want them to think they're great and that's what I'm going for. But there's also that aspect of it where it's true. I like to shoot quietly. If I have my ideal photo shoot, I'm not even talking. I'm just letting my subject do their thing and I'm capturing those moments. But I'm controlling everything. I lit it. I'm composing it. I decide when I push the button. Sorry for the aside. Then at the end, you need to finish with power and leave your reviewer wanting more. Again, just as important as that first image that leads them into your work, you want them to walk away going, wow, that was a complete story that I just got in that 15 minutes or 20 minutes or hour, whatever it is. So for me, I chose Steven Tyler. This was a strong image. It represents me in a lot of different ways, right? It's a natural light portrait, which I don't do a ton of. Most of my work is actually lit, but it shows that I understand light. And right out the gate, that's the message I want people to get from me. I understand light. That's my job. I'm a photographer. I understand light. My end is Steven Tyler as well. This image, for me, and this is where that line can be drawn about whether it's personal or too close to your image, whatever the case is. But this image for me, obviously it's a big celebrity. Obviously it was a moment that was pretty damn cool. Let's put it that way. But what it was for me was a point at which my career changed. I realized that this is the kind of image I could make, and this is the kind of jobs that I could do, not just from the behind the scenes part, which I'll tell you in a second, but also that this aspires to the level of photography that I want to be doing. It sends a message. This is who this guy is. He shoots celebrities, he shoots musicians, he shoots big time people, and he makes them comfortable. I don't think you could look at this image and think this guy is uncomfortable, okay? Now, what you don't know, which is the best part of photography and why photographers should never explain their images, but the truth of the matter is, this is photographed in a horrible environment. This was in a garage, just so happened to have a perfect medium gray wall, but the wall's actually not that big. So the reason it's cropped the way it's cropped is that's all I could utilize of the wall. Then it was something else on either side of the wall. The light in the back behind him is actually shot through a doorway because I had no room to put a light far enough away from him that it wouldn't hit the side of his face where I didn't want it to hit. And it was just a subtle touch to remove him from the background a little bit better. The light is actually on his face is actually boomed over a very expensive car. So we were kind of nervous about the whole situation in general. I'm actually leaning against that car to make the portrait at the focal length that I'm shooting, to get it far enough away to make it as portrait of his lens as possible. All that stuff doesn't matter to the reviewer, but it says everything it needs to say for me as a photographer. So it's what I like to call, and you'll see this again, an evergreen in my portfolio, meaning that it stays in my portfolio for a good length of time. It has been in my portfolio for a while, regardless of how old it is, regardless how old he is, he's still relevant. And so many of the people that view my portfolio are going to see this image and be like, Steven Tyler, you know, like it's Aerosmith. There's no mistake in it, right? this is what for me is an eye break. Again, I have constant portraits, you know, you're looking at people's eyes, you're doing this, doing that. And this does a lot. One, it's on a big white space. Two, it's a moment, and it shows that I can capture a spontaneous moment. That's important. That's a message I want out there without me necessarily saying I can capture spontaneous moments. If somebody's reviewing my portfolio and they're not even talking to me, I want them to extrapolate that, and that goes back to that psychology question that you had. Another eye break. It's just so busy, there's a lot going on, so maybe it's a lot, but it's also not just a big face, right? It's not a portrait made in a studio with a flat background. It's showing not only something different, but it also says, hey, wait, this guy can shoot in an environment, and he can light something in an environment. And as I mentioned, having those pre-stories in my head all the time, when somebody stops at this image, I'm like, oh, super interesting story. This guy makes guitars for all these famous musicians. And I always had this idea of photographing a guitar maker. And it took me like 6 months to find this guy. But he was, you know, when I first moved to LA, he was one of the first people I met. And he was like, yeah, come by the shop. And I spent the whole day shooting around his workshop and in the wood shop and all these different places. And this was his office, and it was so cool, but it was so tightly packed. I had to come up with a way to light it. So I ended up booming a light through the doorway and back into the walls and fired it back towards him. And that's how I created this light. And they're like, whoa, how did you come up with that? And I was like, well, because I couldn't fit a light in the room. And this was a good solution. So again, it's telling a story that says, I'm that guy that will figure out a solution when the challenge is there with light. I want that story out there. So there's intention. Another eye break, you know. If you're a landscape photographer or travel photographer, this is the kind of stuff you want in your portfolio to break the monotony of big, busy scenes, or, you know, maybe every shot is buildings, and now this is a nice break from that. If you're a still life photographer, like I said, just a simple image. Let's say everything you have is floating in water, or, you know, those still lifes where lots of things are, you know, all over the place in the scene, and there's like lots of products and shoes flying in the air and all kinds of stuff. But then you break it up with something like this that's super simple. That's a way to do that. For athlete portraits, I have a lot of action. I have like guys jumping through fire. I have this, I have that, and all these other things. It can become overwhelming, but then a simple image like this, and then again, I've got a story. This was done in a yoga studio in the back of the gym where I threw up a seamless and a light, and I had 30 seconds with each of these basketball players who were trying out for the NBA Combine. It's a great story, right? That's cool. I'm a cool guy. You want to hire a cool guy, right? That's what you want. So how to prepare? First and foremost, you need to write out the goals of this portfolio. What is this portfolio going to say about you as the photographer? And me personally, I'm not a writer, you know, but the exercise of putting it down on paper really will help you start to visualize where you want this portfolio to go. Then you gather your images. Now you can do this on a computer, or you can go old school and print out every image you have that you're considering. And this is how we used to do it back in the day. We'd print out like little mini versions of everything, and we'd put it out on the floor, up on a bulletin board, and we'd start playing with the arrangement of that. So mini prints or view it on screen. I use Lightroom to organize and move my images around, and I start playing with it that way, or sometimes I'll use Bridge. Your first edit should be just purely on image selection. You should just be going through and looking at the images that say something that makes you want to say, that's a great image and it represents what I do. Your second edit should then be about that flow. You start moving things around. You start thinking of an order where images can be and what will be a seamless flow of those images. And your third edit is all about that flow and avoiding those hitches that I was talking about. So as you're showcasing through, and let's go, for example, with Lightroom. When you put that in order in Lightroom and then you hit the space bar, then it opens the image up bigger. And then you sit there with the arrow keys and you just go at that pace like I showed you my portfolio. And anytime you pause, think about why you're pausing. Is it a good thing? Or is it something that's paused because it doesn't make sense with everything else? Then you go back to that grid and start moving things around or eliminating things. And often when I'm making a portfolio, that's the time I will really think about how can I bring everything down to a point where it's the strongest set of images, even if it's only 10 images. I would rather, and I used to tell this to young photographers all the time when I was an editor, I'd rather see your 10 best images than 25 images because you felt like you needed to fill the portfolio. Love this one from Batman. It doesn't matter who you are, it matters what's your plan. Now, this is a theme in all of my work. Making your portfolio. If you've seen any of my other speaking engagements on lighting and all that stuff, I'm always going in with a plan. Even if I stray from that plan, the reason that I can succeed is because I have a plan to start with. That's a jumping board for me. That means when things go awry, and they do all the time, I now know what doesn't work, so I can move forward. The worst thing to be on set is a scrambling photographer. You don't know what to do because your lights broke, and you don't have a solution for your client in that moment. So, and we can talk about this part in depth if you like. We don't have to stay on topic with the portfolios, but making those plans is huge. And it's the same with a portfolio as it is on set. Go in with a plan and you'll succeed. Go in without a plan and you've only got the one option. So just to show you a version of how I edit. So let's just say for this portfolio that you just saw, this is where I began. So I have everything there. I know what I wanted to start with, and I had moved it already to that position. Here's all of the images that I was considering. I look at this and I start assessing all of those markers that I was just talking about. What's going to be an eye break? What's going to help me tell the story of who I am as a photographer? What's going to give me enough talking points as a photographer that if I'm sitting in a room with a reviewer or doing 20 reviews in a 2-day period, I have enough stories that I can hit this wide gamut of individuals and have enough interesting things to talk about that not only speak about me as a photographer, but what I do on set, how I do what I do on set, how I interact with my subjects, what's a typical photo shoot look like. These are all the things that these people want to know because there are no second shoots anymore, right? There's no redos anymore. There used to be, but not anymore. Nobody can afford it. Nobody has time for it. Then I will start to cull down from there and eliminate the things that maybe are telling the same story twice, that I don't need it, right? Maybe just from a color perspective, it doesn't work within the mix of how I did it. Perhaps, like I said earlier, I've already shown this style of, I shoot a lot of different lighting styles. So part of my story is I have a solution for every lighting situation you're in. That's part of my thing, right? If you shoot one lighting style, this might be more of a challenge because you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. But for me, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, regardless of it, maybe the image of an unknown is better than an image of an A-lister, and the accomplished image is better. I might drop the A-lister because the lighting was exactly the same. Or in some cases, I might leave the A-lister in there because I need to tell the story about what it was like to work with that person because they want to know that I can make an A-lister comfortable. Evergreen, as I mentioned. So Steven Tyler has stayed in the portfolio year upon year because of what it represents and how it was accomplished. I actually think I'm a better photographer than when I shot this. I think I'm better at lighting. I have more solutions than I did back then. But this image still works within the mix of everything else I do. Questions in there? Yes.
How you understand the image works? At what moment? What particular moment? When the client or after they sign the contract, they confess something?
So the question was, how do you know if an image works, right? Basically, in a portfolio. Again, I have the advantage that I used to be the guy reviewing it. So I kind of know what a good portfolio looks like based on years of looking at all of these different portfolios. And I encourage photographers all the time to go look at their contemporary peers, essentially. Go look at other photographers' portfolios, their websites, assess their work, even on Instagram. Just assess what they're doing, especially if they're a photographer that shoots the same subject matter as you. And think about, and I do this still to this day, and I look and I say, oh, that was really smart. I see what they did there, and maybe I should apply that if that helps tell my story, right? But in terms of a successful image, obviously it's in the eye of the beholder. But you get enough eyes on an image, you start to see the same reaction over and over again. You can kind of gauge that, you know, we all appreciate the same good images. You know, there's a reason that, you know, an image becomes famous, and it's because when enough people see it and respond to it in the same way, you just know. So take the Steven Tyler. I've shown it enough times in different versions of my portfolio and gotten the same reaction all the time. Either it's somebody tells me how big of a fan they are, or they're just like, wow, that's a cool image, or oh my God, what was it like to work with Steven Tyler? So then I know it can stay in there because it still works for me. It still accomplishes those things that I'm looking for, which is either a question, a response, or something that elicits an aspect of that person liking my work. And that's what I'm looking for. When those things stop, that's when an image starts to come out.
Yeah. Tyler looked like in pretty confident pose.
Yes.
Relaxed on this thing, right? And also his eyesight is challenged. What are you up to? Who are you? Like, he's looking from above. You know?
Yes. So
So it's kind of in the portfolio. It's kind of. Do you think it is like challenging
the viewer? Yeah.
Are you ready? Are you ready to meet?
Yeah. So that's a great point. So the point that was made, if you couldn't hear, was essentially that the pose was relaxed, but the expression on Steven Tyler's face was essentially a little bit of a challenge to the camera, where it was a little attitude, a little bit of his personality, I would say, coming through, right? And he's quite funny. He was joking with us a lot throughout the day and all that. And of course, I wanted to get that across to some degree. The danger of talking about an image is that I want you to interpret it the way you interpret it, because it's going to be different than the way you interpret it or that you interpret it. And that's why I hate explaining an image at any point.
Take it away.
I don't want to remove your experience, right? I want that image to appeal to you and to you and to you, but at the same time, I want it to appeal to you for your reasons and your reasons and your reasons, and that's for you. So back when galleries were aplenty and museums were like the thing to go do because we didn't have it on our phones, I would go to art galleries all the time and I'd walk around in silence because I don't want to talk about the images. I just want to suck it in for myself, you know? I'm a huge fan of Avedon, for example. I would go see his shows to essentially soak it in for me. And I don't want to talk about why I like it. I just want to like it, right? And I'm the same way with my photography. I don't want to explain it to you. I'll tell you a story about that day or this or whatever, but I want you to interpret it. Like, I love the way that you interpret that because it's so different than maybe the way you would interpret it.
Thought about Armageddon.
You thought about Armageddon. That song, yeah. That's true. Well, as I was talking about, everything sends a message. So, yeah, there you go, right? So it sent you a message right out the gate. This guy has worked with the Aerosmith guy, right? That's what it says. So when it comes back to this, you know, aspect of your presentation, everything you do sends a message. So if all I was doing was dropping this portfolio off, this is going to send a message to somebody just based on the way that it looks from the outside. Forget about the inside for a second. I'll never forget when I worked at one of the magazines, somebody had this pink shag carpet bound portfolio, and it was gigantic. And I felt like such an idiot walking through the office holding this thing under my arm as I picked it up from the front. And, you know, as I said, I turn red pretty easily. This was when I worked at Marie Claire, and the ladies there loved to embarrass me. And so me walking through the office with a big pink furry portfolio, I felt, you know, kind of silly. But when I opened the book, I understood this was the photographer's message. You know, I'm loud, I'm boisterous. Maybe not my kind of photographer, because I don't like that on set. I don't want my photographer to be a bigger celebrity than my subject. And so me personally, with the athletes and the subjects that I deal with who are, you know, celebrities, I'm the quiet guy in the room. And that's part of the thing I think that works for me is that I'm not there's no ego competing. right? And we all know that there are photographers with humongous egos that are walking into that room, and then it's like putting two bulls in the arena, right? Which one's going to be stronger? Who's in charge? I disarm athletes and I disarm celebrities by the fact that I'm not that person. So it's important to me to be subtle and quiet, right? Which is what I think this says. I hope it says. It's a lot of guessing, not gonna lie. Your work, as I said, is really just the foundation of you as a photographer. 10%. Don't forget that. You're really only pushing a button 10% of the time. Everything else you do, from who you hire, the studio you choose, the music you play, and you should play music on sets, it relaxes everybody, the catering you decide on, all of these things send a message to your clients, to the subjects, and it makes a tremendous difference. One of my biggest clients literally hires us year upon year because they like our vibe on set. Not to use the word vibe, it's so played out in LA, but it's hard not to say it because it is about a vibe.
It's fun.
It is. It's fun to be on set with us. We're the cool people that you want to hang out with. When I worked at that media company, basically I had created a photo department for them. So we had 3 photographers and we were shooting across 5 magazines. We were the fun room. We had music playing, we were always laughing, joking around. Everybody wanted to hang out in our room. And we got to hang out with celebrities, we got to go on jet planes and private jets and this and that and all this stuff, all this fun things. Everybody wanted our stories, everybody wanted to know what we were doing next week. And forget about just being on set was fun with us. You know, the stylist loved when we had a shoot because she got to leave the office and hang out with us on set for the day and meet, you know, this cool person, that cool person. That is humongous. And what am I doing? Shooting for 20 minutes. That's it. 20 minutes, but you're talking days of production. You're talking pre-production, post-production, all those other aspects of it. The shooting part is so small. Going back to the book, you want those talking points. You know the stories behind the image, right? As much as it's not about the talking point, it is about the talking point. You want to have things in your portfolio that will tell your viewer the message about you. It's not about Steven Tyler. It's about what I did that day to get him to relax. It's what, and by the way, the trick there was simple. I brought a very pretty makeup artist. I had a feeling that would make a difference. He was super relaxed all day and he was happy talking to her because he spent more time with her than he did with me. Okay. So I did that with intent, right? I knew it would help set the scene for me to be able to get him to do what I needed him to do. And we had to do 4 setups that day. So it was a lot. Now, leave behinds is a big question mark because these days, as I said, it's tough to get meetings. You're not often face-to-face with people. The follow-up is harder. Everybody's inundated with emails, text messages, DMs, all that stuff. So this part's gotten harder, but I do believe that you should have a leave behind prepared for those individual situations where you do get to meet with people, particularly if you're at those portfolio reviews where you're meeting multiple people over the course of days. Because you need to realize that they're also getting inundated with photographers. They may meet 10 to 15 photographers. How are they going to remember you? So what are you going to do to stand out? Your portfolio is only going to do one part of that. You need to leave behind something that sends a message. Now, if I have a meeting at an agency, for example, I bring cookies or donuts or something, some big treat, right? Big grand gesture of something fun and energetic and whatever. I want to give them a treat at 11 o'clock in the morning. When I have the portfolio reviews, I have a candy tin that I have my logo on one side, and the other side I have my assistant is a illustrator. He did an illustration of me, and I have my Instagram QR code on that. And that's on 2 sides of the tin, and there's candy inside. Now, I've just given them a treat to help keep them awake through their busy day, but I also have that intent. My name is branded there, and on the other side is my Instagram, which typically they'll follow right then and there because the QR code's right there and it's easy. As I mentioned, I did a magazine for a while. This was, somewhat successful for me. I just couldn't maintain doing it because I had a creative director and an editor that were working with me for free. So I was asking a lot of them, and we put out 8 issues, and it was really fun, and I could still easily do it from a standpoint of having the material. What became too difficult was relying on people with other busy lives as well. They had kids, they had this, they had that, all that other stuff going on. So it was a big ask from me. But what it did provide was a good message to the people who were reviewing my work, is that, you know, here's my story, and here, if you care to read it, is a cool package, right? I would print these through Blurb. They were pretty inexpensive if I ordered 20 or 30 at a time, and I would just use them as leave behinds for quite a while. Now, more than anything, I use a combination of either a card or my business card, which is Steven Tyler, which represents me really easily, because when I talked about leaving something memorable behind, they just opened and ended the portfolio with Steven Tyler. My business card is 2-sided. Those 2 images are on each side of that business card. These are also existing digitally, so that when I reach out to individuals to try to get meetings, or if I'm sending a thank you email from somebody I did a Zoom meeting with or met in person or whatever the case is, those are attached to the email. In the email in a way that it opens right away when they open that email. That is super, super important. You don't want to ask people that you're trying to get work from to do work. You got to make it easy for them. So I have on my email, I have a baseline image that goes under my signature, which is almost looks like a piece from my website. It's a bunch of portraits that I did all kind of jammed together. But I will attach this JPEG often to my messages. I do it also on LinkedIn or anywhere I connect with somebody as a thank you to connecting, and I send them one image because I want them to say, oh, this guy does this, okay? So real quick, I'll touch on websites. I know we're gonna run out of time pretty quickly here. You need a website because more likely than not, that's where people are looking at, but people don't look at websites as much anymore. So it's still important to have one because your Instagram might not be enough, okay? Plus as well, social media is tough, right? You're only saying so much. Your grid's gotta be on point. You got this, you got all these algorithm challenges to face. You can control a website. You can't control how social media changes, and it changes all the time. So the website's another sort of line of attack to show people that you're serious, that you're professional. There's so many out there. There's so many options out there that are inexpensive. You can DIY. You can obviously get these ones that are templated out and just insert your images. But don't be afraid to ask a designer to help you. I think it's worth the money to invest in yourself as a photographer to have help if it's not your strong area, just like I did on my logo. Knowing your limits is part of that. So where are your strong points? Maybe your strong point is just making images. Maybe you suck at billing. Get an accountant, get a bookkeeper, whatever the case is, find the people that will help you get your job done so that you can focus on number 1, which is the photography part, that 10% that we all gleam after. The point is really that you do pay for what you get, so you're investing in yourself as a photographer. And I think photographers forget this all the time, that my best piece of advice to young photographers and assistants is that every day you work for me, you owe yourself a day of something. Go shoot, go work on your portfolio, go test something, go explore some area that you don't know yet so that you as a professional photographer can advance. And if you spend a year doing that, you will be able to launch your career a lot faster than your compadres that don't do that. So I like that mentality for even if you're established, that there are times where hiring other people to help you get the job done is worth it because you're investing in yourself. You got to spend money to make money. Nobody would say that if it wasn't true. So this is what happens when you go to my website. I started out right out the gate with the entertainment work because that's the work that I'm focusing on right now. Then the tabs you can see at the top bring you to the other sections of the other kind of work that I do. And I separate it with intent. It's all separated because I don't want to jimble jamble everything. I don't want to send the wrong message that says the same guy that shoots Steven Tyler is shooting these athletes. That can be confusing sometimes. Every so often there's an image that can cross over, but I do like to keep it separate because to me it's separate parts of what I do. Fortunate or unfortunate, I'm one of those guys that shoots a lot of different subject matters. I always have. And for that reason, I like to keep it separate. Other important things are because I'm going after entertainment work, key art is up there, separate, its own category. I can also send this to people as individual links so that it goes directly to those parts. So if you just go to ianspanier.com, you're gonna see this, but if I send you an individual link to get to the key art stuff or to the personal work, you're gonna go directly to that part. That's the way the site's designed. Personal work to me is super, super important. I'm always doing personal work, so I want that up there. Most of the time, creative directors and art directors that I meet, that's what they wanna see. This part's the given, right? They want to see how I see something when there's nobody else telling me what to do or giving me a shot list or all that. So as I mentioned, how important it is to work with other people. When you are working on that portfolio, it doesn't hurt to have somebody else take a look. Sometimes you get fixated. And again, we all love that one image you took of that one person in that one moment because you know that you were hanging backwards off a cliff in order to get that perfect angle and the sky was this and it shouldn't have worked and it did this and you put this filter on and nobody cares, okay? Sorry, doesn't matter. Nobody cares that I figured out that if I put that light all the way behind Steven Tyler in the bathroom and shot it through that doorway, it would just give him a little kiss of light on the end of that stick and it would be perfect. And that if I boomed this here and I leaned against the car and I did this and I did, nobody cares. They just want the end result, especially now, because time is money and money is time and all that stuff. Nobody has time for those stories unless we're sitting here. So you have to be careful on who you ask. Right? Everyone's a creative director, everyone's an art director, as I mentioned earlier. So think really hard about who you're asking to take a look at that work, because the opinion might be juxtaposed by a different angle than you need. So strangers is a good way to do it because you're going to get an honest opinion, hopefully, from somebody that doesn't know you, doesn't know your work. But just asking your grandmother, oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, of course, you know. Calling in a pro. As I mentioned, I work with consultants twice in my career. 2012, it was a game changer for me. It really made a big, big difference in the work that I was getting and how to get to another level. Have somebody else completely isolated from me to look at my work and help arrange a portfolio that made sense. This latest portfolio, I literally got consulted by somebody that hires photographers for the network work that I was trying to get. And I did that intentionally. When I met her, I literally said, I like the way you speak about work. Would you consult me on a portfolio? And thankfully, she was literally just launching a consulting business. And it really changed my view about my work. She introduced some things that I'd never thought of, including what color palette speaks of my work. I never thought of something like that. And thanks to ChatGPT, I did this deep dive on, I call ChatGPT Charlie, which is like a joke, but Charlie told me what my color palette was. I had no idea. I never thought about it that way. I always thought that the way I shot it was my color palette. I'm pretty old school. I shoot clean, or maybe I'll change the color temperature, or maybe I'll throw a gel on a light with intent to send out a message, because I know that my lighting is going to send that message. And the reality is that I never thought to take the time to understand what is the message I'm sending by just the color palette alone. So that had a big influence on this latest portfolio. Okay, we got like 8 minutes for questions if they let me go to the full time. So questions? Yes.
So you talked about how a website is so necessary. You have a beautiful book. How often are you showing that book to art buyers, producers, and photo editors? Are they looking at phones? Are they looking at iPads?
So the question was how important websites are in relation to the fact that you have a book that you've worked really hard at, essentially. Yeah. So the reality is this. That's a personal opinion of mine that a website's still important. I still want to be able to refer clients to view something if they're not going to leave their desk or their home. And everybody works remote now and all these other challenges that we face. as I mentioned, how hard it is to get face-to-face meetings. So as important as it is to have a physical portfolio, I see too many photographers show up at these things with just an iPad. I personally bring a book and an iPad. That way I can get to anything on that website, including all the hidden links that I have, but I have the physical book. And I can't tell you how many times when I sit down at the desk, especially at those, speed dating portfolio reviews, and I put a physical book down, they go, oh, thank God, a physical book. They're tired of looking at screens all day. We all do that all day anyway with our phones. Now, of course, the website has to work on a tablet. It has to work on an iPhone or Android so that if that person that's reviewing your work, if you're up for a job, they can view it wherever they are. So you have to make sure that your website is compatible with all those other things. So having a good website design helps when you know it's going to be viewed in different venues. With a shiny screen, out in the sunlight, or inside a room, it's not always a controlled environment that you can actually see the colors and all that stuff. That's why I like the printed book, because this is more true to what my clients will get. And so much of my work is about print. So it's important to me to show in print. Now, I used to print my own portfolio, but I got kind of tired of the printers always clogging up with ink, and I got all sick of that. I use Blurb to make these books, relatively inexpensive. And great little story. I was meeting with a creative director I know at Amazon, and we were having lunch, and he's looking at the book, and he said, can I borrow this and bring it back to the office and show the photo team? And I was like, you can keep it. And he's like, you sure? And I said, I'd rather it be sitting on your desk, even if it collects dust for 6 months, that somebody walks by and says, what's that? Because we don't see that very often anymore, right? And for me to reorder a new book, worth it. I just got my book into Amazon, and now it's sitting on somebody's desk. Fine by me.
So that was Blurb?
Blurb, yeah, B-L-U-R-B, yeah. Any questions on the chat that you want to hit? I see that one, the images in your book, some paid images for display. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I didn't either. That's
Yeah.
It was probably, are they paid people or?
Oh, okay. So we're not sure if this is the question or not, but if the subjects in my portfolio are paid to be in my portfolio or not. No, I don't pay them to, to be in my book. I'm primarily an assignment photographer. So the images that end up in my book are mostly from assignment. And the only exception to that is if it's a personal project or somebody that, I have models and actors that I work with on the regular for either demonstrations or whatever. Quite often, images are made that end up being good enough to be in the portfolio, and sometimes they'll land in the portfolio that way. Or I'll be creating some educational videos and we'll do a shot that just is really cool, and that could end up in there as well. But I would say as a whole, this portfolio is primarily assignment, whether it's editorial, marketing, advertising, and then personal work. And again, the personal work that's in there is with intent. I want to talk about that. So I put it in there that on the occasion that the person who sees it likes that image, then I can say, oh yeah, that's part of my personal project called Right Next Door, where it's interesting people that live all around you that you have no idea what their story is. And I did that for 3.5 years, and I met this person from here to here to here to here, and it's a great story. And quite often at those reviews, that's one that people will say, oh wow, can you send me a link to that? I'd like to see the rest of it, because I have the written stories of each person up on the website as well. Yeah. Other questions? You look like an inquisitive person. I put you on the spot. What about you? I challenged you to come up with a question at the end of the day.
I kind of did.
Yeah.
Did Stevens ask you to pose him when you were taking that shot, or was that the intent to have him stand this way?
Sure. So the question was, going back to that Steven Tyler image, did he ask me to pose him that way, or how did that work? Part of my way of working with talent is essentially to explain to them what we're doing and how I'm lighting them so they understand where the light's coming from. So for example, if that light was off and I was telling my subject, I'm going to be over here, That's your background. That's your key light. So your best light's going to come from that light right there. I'm going to say, if you turn this way, this face may be in shadow, but when you turn here, you're going to get that nice light on you. So I'll give them a little bit of that information. And for what I've seen, when you present that to most subjects, that lets them think they're part of it, right? Which they are. There's that famous line about there's two people in every photograph, the photographer and the subject, right? And then I will also say, and it's kind of my line, which is, you know, that thing I said earlier, I can't tell you how to be you, so you be yourself. I'm going to tell you where to stand and where your light is coming from. But whatever I tell you where to be, I need you to make it your own. So if I ask you to sit down, I want you to sit the way you would sit, naturally, like if we were just having a conversation. And I'll go through this little routine. It takes about 2 minutes, and it's part of me reading them. It's part of me building that rapport very quickly. And then I say that line of, if I'm quiet, it means you're doing great. And if I'm talking and telling you this, that, or whatever, it just means I like what you're doing. I want you to repeat it so I can make sure I got it captured. Now they're a part of that, right? They think they're in charge of something. And now I'm saying, I lit it, I compose it, I shoot the button. I'm really in charge. I'm just letting them think that they're in charge.
And did you do research on him?
I research all my subjects. I want to know what music they listen to, if I can have it on in the room. Now, Google's wrong a lot, but I try to create a sense of comfort the minute that somebody's there. And it works most of the time, I would say. There's really great opportunity to get somebody right in the right, sense of mind when they walk in and their music's playing.
So what do you think about color versus black and white? Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the question is, what do I think about color versus black and white? Again, you're trying to tell the story of you. So if all of your work is black and white, nothing wrong with that. Not going to get a lot of assignments in black and white these days in commercial side, which is what I know. But the reality is I obviously have a mix of it in there because everybody loves black and white. And people who are fans of photography always love black and white. So I always want a little bit of it in there. And every so often I can convince a client this will be great in black and white. I try to shove it in as much as possible because I love it, but it's not always possible.
Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Yes.
So let's say my specialty is food, right, and restaurants. But I start to make portraits of the chef, of these people, and then I start to travel, and then I start to make more portraits, more artistic portraits, right?
Yeah.
So in my portfolio, should I show both works? Because some people say you should focus on one thing because you're gonna distract the client.
Yeah.
But I do both.
I understand. So the question essentially is, you shoot a variety within one subject, but it's vast. And should you show all of that you do, or just stay focused in the one area, which in your case is food photography? If I listened to everyone who told me that 25 years ago, I wouldn't be where I am today. I've fought upstream my entire career of being somebody that can photograph anything. And I often tell people, part of my early elevator pitch was, I'm a portrait photographer, but I define that differently. That I don't care if it's a cup of coffee, a business person, an athlete, or an A-list celebrity, I'm still making a portrait. Whatever is in front of my lens is what I'm making a portrait of that day. It's all about the lighting. It's all about telling the story. That's my thing. That was my pitch for a long, long time. Personally, I believe that if you're a food photographer, but you have the skill and the ability to do the portrait of the chef and do the travel shot and do the exterior of the restaurant, that only makes you more sellable as a photographer, because nowadays we're asked to do everything and then some. I do motion and stills. I'm not a motion guy. I don't even see the world that way. I see everything in stills, but I'm being asked to shoot video more often now than ever before. And so I'm building that skill set as well, because it's a necessity to get the job. So it could be the difference between me getting hired or not hired. One of the biggest jobs I did during COVID was me convincing the client that I could shoot the celebrity on set during the filming of a commercial and shoot all the still life of the product on the other day. And also shoot BTS while they filmed the commercial. And I did all three, and it gave them that much more content, which, as you know, content is key. So for you to get an assignment from a restaurant, for example, and shoot all the dishes, plus the chef, plus the restaurant, why wouldn't you show your book that you can do that?
Some of the portraits are very artistic. There's nothing to do with
That's
chef.
okay.
So should I put both in my portfolio?
I think you have to look at, the question was basically, if it's something so artistic that it might not fit with the other stuff, you have to make that assessment based on those rules I was essentially saying, that if you pause as you're looking at your book as a whole, because those artistic portraits stand out so different from everything else, then there's your answer right there. But if it somehow works in the mix, then it's okay, right? It's the same as black and white and color, right? I can put black and white in that portfolio because with or without color, there's still a symbiosis between the way that I show my color and the way that I show my black and white. It's actually the same technique that I'm putting on top of the image in post for the color that it is for the black and white. So that's why they work together. And my message is always about lighting. That's the message I'm saying. So if it's part of your message that those artistic portraits are part of how you accomplish a single job, and you're letting your client know that I can do the straight up portrait, and I can do the artistic portrait, I can do the food, and I can do the restaurant exterior and a landscape of the area where the restaurant's located, I don't see anything wrong with that as long as there's a cohesive feel as you're looking through that portfolio. If you pause because of any of those one things, then you question whether something's wrong.
You have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
For a wedding photographer that hit a wall, what would you recommend to resolve?
So I think this happens to photographers all the time. We hit blocks of time. The longer you're around, the more you're going to hit the wall because there's going to be times where your career stalls, business changes. Obviously, the magazine industry that I relied on for the beginning of my career is all but gone. We used to make decent money in magazines. Now it's all flat rates. It's really difficult to stay in business just doing that. And it's the same across the board. And with the area that you work in, if you don't evolve as a photographer, you're going to get left behind. So one of the people at Adorama actually asked me to comment on AI in an article that they put out a couple of months ago. And my response was this: I'm not afraid about AI taking the place of photography, but I would argue that the photographers that ignore AI will get left behind. And it's the same thing with any area that you work in photography. If you don't evolve as a photographer continually, you will get left behind. It's survival of the fittest, right? My mentor is a guy called Harry Benson. Watching him evolve over his career, in my lifetime alone, he changed 3 times. He went from shooting chrome to negative film. That made a tremendous difference in his success in those shoots. Then he went from film cameras to digital cameras, and that changed him again. And so seeing that in real time happen and make him a better photographer just by staying on point with technology and how things were changing. Everybody shot chrome in his day and age, right? But film has a lot more latitude. And then digital comes out and it has just as much latitude as film, if not more. And especially now with the cameras the way they are now, plus you have autofocus, plus you have the ability, as you get older and our eyes are falling apart and all that stuff that happens to many of us, the composure is still up here. The ability to get your subject to do this is still up there for him. And so his ability to still create the image, but using that technology to his advantage, allowed him to continue to work well into his 80s. I think he's 94, 95 now. And he sells images primarily. He doesn't shoot as much, but he evolved as time went on as a photographer. How many of his contemporaries can say that? And he came from a time, if you're not familiar with his work, he was a photographer who came to America with the Beatles and photographed every president from Eisenhower to Trump. Think about how long of a period of time that is. And his ability to stay working, and at the time, I think, there was probably 20 big photographers back then. There really wasn't a lot. Not like now, where a dime a dozen. Everyone with an iPhone's a photographer, right? So, any other ones? How do you know which
subject for photography you have to improve live composition, talking to better clients and acquiring leads?
That's the wall I'm talking about.
Okay. How do you know which subject? Okay, so this might be a good opportunity. You all heard that question, yeah? Okay, so the question was essentially, how do you know which subject for photography you have to improve? Light, composition, talking better to clients and acquiring leads. That's the wall that the photographer in particular was talking about in the wedding industry, I guess. And again, this might be a place where you've come to a spot where you don't know how to proceed and stay in business. This might be the opportunity to get a consultant to work with, meet another wedding photographer who is successful and ask those questions. Find out, hey, you do celebrity portraits. How do you get to do celebrity portraits? You shoot big time weddings. You charge $10,000 a day. How do you charge $10,000 a day? What are you doing that allows you to charge $10,000 a day? And those people are out there. So going to the big photography events, going to the camera stores, meeting other photographers, finding ways to meet these people so that you can interact. I think the big problem in our industry is that a lot of photographers are afraid to talk to other photographers and interact. And, our sort of society, especially after COVID, sort of separated in a lot of ways. But I get DMs all the time from people saying, how did you do that? And I'm very open about it. I don't care. I can tell you exactly how I lit something. You're never going to take the same picture as me anyway. You're not going to press the button the same time I did it. You're not going to compose it the same. So there's no threat to me to tell you exactly how I work. Not everybody's like that. I get that. But there are people out there. There's consultants out there. And I think that makes a big difference. I consult on the side. Every so often, I'll get a photographer reach out to me and say, hey, I just want to learn this. LACP, which is out in California, it's a Los Angeles Center of Photography. They do a fundraising, money-making opportunity for photographers to become a mentee to a professional photographer. I volunteer and do that every year because I love to share this knowledge with photographers. I'd rather you guys become better photographers and understand how to do it right, using a light meter, using a camera the way that you're actually controlling it, not just putting it on automatic, understanding light. I'd rather you guys know that stuff. Put me out of business. I don't care. I'd rather you know that than you to put me out of business because you know how to point an iPhone in a certain direction and not know anything about actual photography. So I see this one because I figured this would be said. The question was, I've been trying to contact better photographers and they're all gatekeep or don't even answer my emails. I'm looking for a mentor and I can't find one. I hear this a lot and it is true. There are a lot of gatekeepers out there, but there's some guys like me. We're nice. And you know what? Again, it's investing in your business. I'm not trying to sell it for me. I'm just saying there are people out there that will do it. And there are photographers that will take on individuals as an intern and teach them in exchange for working together. I've done that. It's hard for me in LA. It was easier in New York because we're kind of closer to each other. But I had an intern for a year and a half because he knew nothing about lighting and he wanted to learn. He wanted to be an assistant. He got to meet my other assistants and then they start networking out. Assistants are great, by the way, because a lot of them know more than the photographers. So getting in that pool could help you as well. Assisting is a great path. I didn't take that path just because I was lucky that I was working from a different side of the business and I was able to leave that and go into photography the way I did. So my assisting experience wasn't the same as most people. I did a couple of small jobs and that was it. And it shows. I don't know the gear as well as a lot of my assistants. I'm pretty good at it. I'm pretty into it. But I still throw a C-stand upside down sometimes and things like that. I'm not perfect. Any other questions in there?
How do you go about, do you have like a usual team you work with, or how do you go about selecting your team?
Sure. So the question is, how do you go about selecting the team that you work with, or do you have a regular team? For me, yes, I have a regular team of people, a lot in LA, obviously, because that's where I am now. But even when I work here in New York, I've got people that I've worked with for years that I still, stay in touch with. And when I'm here for jobs, then I can more easily work with local talent. I tend to stay with the same people for as long as I can, mostly because I don't want to think about them. They're part of my crew that I don't even want to focus on whatsoever. I hire them because they reflect me as a person. And that is very, very important, that you build a team of people around you that reflect your business and who you are. As I said, I'm pretty quiet on set, so I don't like yappy assistants. I don't like big personalities. If a stylist is too over the top, like it's not for me. It's not going to work well. I'd like people that just like to do their job, keep their head down, have good opinions, or know when not to give an opinion, and that's it. And because I'm very hands-on with lighting, I like to be able to bounce off my assistant with lighting stuff, but I don't rely on that. But that's for me. There's other photographers that don't know any lighting, but they're very good at photography. They rely on those assistants to do all the lighting. Nothing wrong with that. But it's that relationship, and you are building relationships. And I'd rather have good people all around me that reflect me than anything else. And that's why, like that client that I was talking about that keeps returning, they just like my crew because we're all pretty easygoing people. Everybody says I'm too chill now that I moved to LA, but I'm okay with that. Any other questions? Can be off topic too. I'm never afraid of the off topic.
You give courses out in LA as well? Yeah.
Yes, the question was if I give courses in LA as well. Yes, on occasion. There's a couple of times where I'll appear at studios with limited seating kind of things, but I do demonstrations. I am here as much as I can be. Anytime I'm back in New York, I call Teresa and say, is there a spot for me to do a demonstration? Most of my speaking engagements these days are demonstration based. So this one was just unusual because I was in town, but please come back next time I'm here. I typically do, I'm a Westcott Top Pro, so I typically do lighting demonstrations, technique. The last one I did here, you can watch on YouTube, that was understanding light. And I was talking about my theories about how to understand light to become a better photographer. I always jump on my soapbox about light meters for that reason, because I think it's really the path to understanding the way light works, whether it's continuous light or strobe. But I have a dozen or so lectures that I do, and hopefully I'll be back here again to do more of those. If you follow me on Instagram, which that's the QR code, you'll see all those listings up there. I will be at PPA this year. I don't know if anybody here goes to that, but that's a big conference in Charlotte this year, or 2027, I should say. And I will be there for pre-con. So that's a good opportunity. And Teresa's usually nice enough to have me at the booth as well, so at the expo. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your attention. Thanks for braving the weather. Now, who's going to ask me a question off camera? Because I know this always happens. Somebody always does it.
Yeah. What part do you intervene